They said he would never amount to anything. In the village of Ashenvale, power was everything. Every child born under the crimson sky was tested on their 5th birthday. A single touch of the Elder's Stone would reveal their spiritual core, the source of all strength, all destiny, all worth. Most children lit the stone with a warm golden glow. Some, the gifted ones, burned it bright white. Those children were celebrated. Their names were carved into the walls of the great hall. Their futures were written in glory before they could even read. But on the day Kaito pressed his small palm against the Elder's Stone, nothing happened. No glow, no warmth, no light, just silence. And in that silence, the entire village exhaled a collective breath of pity. His mother held back tears. His father stared at the ground. The elder simply moved on to the next child, as if Kaito had already ceased to exist. He was 5 years old, and the world had already decided he was worthless. Growing up in Ashenvale with no spiritual core was not just difficult, it was humiliating. The other children trained every morning in the courtyard, channeling their energy, shaping fire and wind and stone with nothing but their will. Kaito watched from the fence, always on the outside. He tried once to join them. A boy named Dren laughed so hard he fell over. "What are you going to do, Kaito? Bore the enemy to death." The others laughed too. Even the training master said nothing. What was there to say? Rules existed for those who had power. For those who did not, the rules simply did not apply because they did not matter. So Kaito ran. Every morning before sunrise, while the others slept, he ran. Through the forest, up the mountain trails, along the river where the stones were slick and dangerous. He ran until his legs gave out. Then he crawled. Then he rested. Then he ran again. He did not know why. There was no technique to it, no master teaching him, no ancient scroll guiding his steps. He just ran, because standing still felt like accepting what they had decided he was, and Kaito refused to accept it. On his 13th birthday, he found the cave. He had chased a wounded fox deep into the eastern forest, past the boundary markers, into the land the villagers called the Hollow Dark. No one went there. The elders said ancient spirits guarded those woods, and those spirits did not welcome the living. Kaito had never put much stock in ghost stories. Ghosts, after all, had never laughed at him. The cave entrance was barely visible behind a curtain of hanging moss. Inside, the air was cold and still, and the walls shimmered faintly with something that was not quite light. At the center of the cave, embedded in the rock floor, was a single black stone, different from the Elder's Stone, smaller, rougher, almost ugly. Without thinking, Kaito knelt down and touched it. The reaction was not golden. It was not white. It was black, a deep, consuming, absolute black, like the space between stars. The stone cracked down the middle. The air pressure in the cave dropped so suddenly that Kaito's ears popped, and then everything went quiet in a way that felt less like silence and more like the world holding its breath. A voice spoke, not with sound, with weight. "You have no core because you are the core." Kaito did not understand, but something in his chest shifted, like a door that had always been locked had just been touched by the right key for the first time. He walked home that evening with mud on his hands and a strange new feeling in his chest that he did not have a word for yet. He would later learn the word was awakening. Nothing changed overnight. That is the part the old legends always skip. They jump from the moment of discovery to the moment of triumph, as if the middle does not matter, as if the struggle is just scenery. But the middle is where Kaito lived for the next 3 years. He returned to the cave every day. He sat with the cracked black stone. He meditated, though no one had taught him how. He breathed, slowly and deliberately, trying to feel whatever it was the voice had spoken of. Some days he felt nothing. Most days he felt nothing. On the days he felt something, it was usually pain, a pressure behind his eyes, a heat in his bones that had no source. His nose bled often. He passed out twice. Once he woke up 3 hours later with his hands pressed flat against the cave floor and frost on his eyelashes, even though it was summer. He kept going back. Meanwhile, the village moved on without him. Dren became a third-rank cultivator at 15 and was recruited by the regional academy. Others followed. The courtyard that had once excluded Kaito was now empty. Everyone had moved on to bigger arenas, bigger stages, bigger futures. Kaito was still running his trails, still bleeding in his cave, still being no one. But something was quietly, stubbornly, impossibly growing. The first real sign came during a storm. He was 16. A group of bandits had pushed through the eastern road and cornered a merchant family just outside the village. The village guards, all trained cultivators, were dealing with a separate threat at the northern gate. There was no one. Kaito happened to be there. Wrong place, wrong time, or perhaps the only right place at the only right time. The lead bandit looked at him and actually smiled, the boy with no core. He had heard of Kaito. Everyone in Ashenvale had. The walking joke, the empty child. "Run along," the bandit said, almost kindly. "This does not concern dead weight." Kaito looked at the merchant's daughter. She could not have been older than 8, hiding behind her mother's back and shaking. He thought about the fence, about always watching from the outside. He stepped forward. What happened next, Kaito himself could not fully explain. He reached inward. The way he had practiced 10,000 times in that cave, and he pulled, not at fire or wind or stone, at something deeper, at the space beneath those things. The silence that existed before energy had a shape. The bandits flew backward, not dramatically, not like in the stories. They simply stopped, like the air around them had become a wall. 3 of them hit the tree line hard and did not get up. The 4th ran. Kaito stood in the road, breathing hard, hands trembling. The merchant stared at him. What was that? The man whispered. What core is that? Kaito looked at his own hands. I do not know, he said honestly, but he was smiling. Word traveled fast in small villages. By the next morning, the story had already mutated into something larger than the truth. By noon, it had grown wings. By evening, Kaito had reportedly defeated 12 bandits, stopped a fire with his bare hands, and spoken with a spirit. He had defeated 3 bandits, done nothing with fire, and definitely not spoken with a spirit. But the effect was real. People looked at him differently, not with respect, not yet. That would take longer, but with something new, uncertainty. The comfortable story of Kaito as the village failure had developed a crack. Dren came back from the academy 3 weeks later for a seasonal visit and heard the rumors. He cornered Kaito by the river. They're saying you have some kind of power, Dren said, his tone somewhere between skeptical and uneasy. I have something, Kaito said carefully. What rank? Kaito thought about it. I do not think it fits in the ranking system. Dren's eyes narrowed. He was a 3rd-rank cultivator. He had trained hard for that. He had earned it by every standard the world recognized. The idea that someone who had been nothing could step outside the system that defined everything, that was not just unexpected. It was threatening. Show me, Dren said. No. Excuse me. I am not a performance, Kaito said simply and walked away. For the first time in his life, no one laughed. At 17, a master found him. Her name was Sora Van. She was old, older than the academy, some said. A woman who had lived through 3 wars and 2 collapsed empires and emerged from all of it with white hair, a crooked walking stick, and eyes that looked through you rather than at you. She arrived at Ashenvale on a perfectly ordinary afternoon and walked directly to Kaito's door as if she had a map. The Void Cultivator, she said when he opened it. I wondered if one would finally emerge in my lifetime. I do not know what that means, Kaito said. I know, that is why I am here. She tilted her head. You have been teaching yourself with no guidance for how long? 4 years. She was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, a dry rustling sound like autumn leaves. 4 years, self-taught, and you already stopped 3 bandits. She shook her head slowly. Boy, you have no idea what you are. She stayed for 2 years. She did not teach him techniques. She said techniques were a crutch, useful for those with normal cores because they needed structure to channel power that came in a standard form. Kaito's power did not come in a standard form. It came from the space where form did not exist yet. Instead, she taught him to understand. She taught him the history of void cultivation, a discipline so rare that most scholars believed it was mythological. Unlike fire, water, earth, or wind cores, which drew on existing energy in the world, a void core generated its own. It did not fill, it absorbed. It did not project, it nullified. And at its deepest levels, it did not just cancel energy. It unmade it, returned it to the nothing that existed before anything was. That is why the Elder's Stone showed nothing, Sora explained one evening over a fire. The stone measures what you have. You had nothing that could be measured. The stone was looking for a signal and found only silence. But silence in the right context is not the absence of power. It is the purest form of it. Kaito sat with that for a long time. So all those years, he said quietly, I was not broken. No, Sora said. You were simply incompatible with a very small measuring system. At 19, he left Ashenvale, not in anger, not to prove anything to anyone, though he could have. Dren was a 5th-rank cultivator now, considered exceptional by the academy. On the day Kaito departed, Dren happened to be in the village square. Their eyes met. Dren looked away first. Kaito did not feel triumph in that moment. He felt something quieter, sadder maybe. He had spent so many years wanting to be seen by people like Dren, wanting to be acknowledged by a world that had dismissed him. And now that the world was beginning to turn its face toward him, he found he no longer needed it to. He had built something inside himself that did not require external validation to stand. He bowed to his parents. His mother cried. His father, a quiet man who had never quite known what to say when the world wrote off his son, pressed a hand to Kaito's shoulder and kept it there for a long moment. No words. Just that hand, the weight of a father who had never stopped believing, even when he did not know how to say so. Kaito walked out of Ashenvale with nothing but a pack on his back and a void in his chest that was not empty, that had never been empty, but full of something the world did not have a name for yet. The world beyond Ashenvale was larger and crueler and more beautiful than he had imagined. He traveled through the shattered reaches, a region where old battles had left the land itself wounded, craters of dead earth, rivers that ran backward, forests where the trees grew downward into the sky. It was here he encountered his first real opponent, not a bandit, not a village bully, a ranked cultivator from the Imperial Outer Guard, a man named Thane, 7th rank, sent to collect taxes from a village of farmers who had nothing left to give. Kaito intervened. The fight was not long. Thane was powerful by any conventional standard. His fire core could melt stone, had melted stone, had made a career of melting things that stood in his way. He hit Kaito with everything he had. Kaito absorbed it, all of it, not with technique, with nature, with the simple fundamental reality of what he was. The void did not fight fire. It simply received it and returned silence. Thane stood there, breathing hard, his power spent, staring at a boy who looked no different than before the attack began. "What are you?" Thane whispered. "I am not sure yet," Kaito admitted. Thane fled. The village farmers stood at the edges of their fields and watched this boy they had never seen before walk away in the direction of the horizon. No one knew his name. He did not tell them, not yet. Over the next 3 years, the name came on its own. In the stories that spread from village to village, across trade routes and military lines and academy common rooms, he was called different things. The Hollow Saint, the Empty Blade, the Silence That Walks. He hated all of them. He was just Kaito, the boy from Ashenvale who ran trails before sunrise because standing still felt like giving up. The boy who sat alone in a cave for 4 years talking to a cracked black stone. The boy who had been told he was nothing and had decided, quietly and without drama, that the people doing the telling were simply wrong. He grew stronger in ways that defied the ranking system entirely. Third-rank cultivators challenged him and came away confused. Fifth-rank cultivators challenged him and came away shaken. A seventh-ranked champion from the Northern Academies sought him out personally, convinced he was a fraud, and after 10 minutes of engagement, sat down in the road and asked if he could become Kaito's student. Kaito said he did not take students. "Why not?" the champion asked. "Because I still do not know what I am," Kaito said. "I cannot teach what I am still learning." The true test came when he was 22. The Hollow War. A conflict that had been building for decades finally broke open. A faction of high-ranked cultivators who believed power should be held by the few, that the strong had a right to reshape the world to their preference, regardless of the cost to the many. They called themselves the Sovereign Chain. Their leader was a man named Rarest, 9th rank, widely considered the most powerful cultivator alive. A man who had built an empire on the logic that strength justified everything, that the weak existed to serve the strong, and that anything less than domination was weakness in disguise. He was, in many ways, everything that Ashenvale had tried to teach Kaito to accept. The war went badly for the free regions. The Sovereign Chain moved through the land with the certainty of people who have never been stopped. Town after town, academy after academy. General after general fell before them. Kaito had avoided the war. He was not a soldier. He had no allegiance to crowns or councils. But he had allegiances to people, to farmers in their fields, to merchants on broken roads, to children hiding behind their mothers' backs. When the Sovereign Chain moved toward the shattered reaches, toward the village of farmers he had helped 3 years earlier, Kaito turned around. He walked toward the war. He met Rarest on the field of Marin, a flat plain that history would eventually rename in the aftermath of what happened there. Rarest was everything the legends described. Tall, composed, radiating energy so dense it was visible, a golden shimmer around him like a second skin. He looked at Kaito the way the elder had once looked at him, as if performing an assessment, as if reaching a verdict. The Void Cultivator, Rarest said, without particular interest. "I heard rumors. I dismissed them, most people do," Kaito said. "Your power is unusual. I will not pretend otherwise." Rarest tilted his head. "But unusual is not the same as sufficient. I know, you are not afraid." "I was afraid for most of my life," Kaito said. "I got tired of it." Rarest moved. The force that came out of him was immense, not just 9th-rank power, but the accumulated energy of a man who had consumed the spiritual cores of enemies for decades, who had built himself into something closer to a natural disaster than a human being. The golden light hit the field like a breaking wave. Kaito stood in the center of it, and absorbed it, not just deflected, not blocked. Absorbed, pulled it into the void, stripped it of shape and intention, and returned nothing. Rarest's face changed for the first time. The composure cracked, not much but enough. He struck again, harder, everything he had. Kaito took a step forward. And again, another step forward. The golden light dimmed. Rarest's eyes widened. He understood then what Sora had told Kaito years ago. The void does not fight. It does not overpower. It simply receives and unmakes. And the deeper the power thrown against it, the deeper it can reach. Kaito reached out and placed one hand on Rarest's chest, not violently, almost gently. "It is over," Kaito said quietly. The golden shimmer went out like a candle. Rarest sat down heavily in the grass, not unconscious, not dead, just empty. His spiritual core, the source of all that power, all that certainty, all that cruelty, simply no longer had a shape. It had been returned to the nothing before power existed. He was not hurt, he was just ordinary. Finally, for the first time in his life, ordinary. The Sovereign Chain, watching from the edges of the field, stood in silence for a long moment. Then one by one, they put down their weapons. The world changed after Marin. Slowly, the way the world always changes. Not overnight, not cleanly. But in the months and years that followed, the ranking systems began to be questioned. The idea that power at birth determined worth began to feel less like truth and more like a story powerful people had told to stay powerful. Kaito was offered things, titles, territories, seats of honor. He refused all of them. He went back to Ashen Vale. The village was smaller than he remembered. Most places are when you have seen more of the world. The fence around the training courtyard was still there, a little older, a little more weathered. He ran his old trails. They were overgrown in places, but still there. His mother made a meal that tasted exactly like his childhood. He sat with his father on the porch in the evening and watched the sky go from orange to purple to dark. "Are you done?" his father asked, "with all of it?" Kaito thought about it. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I am not in a hurry anymore." His father nodded, as if that were the best possible answer. The stars came out over Ashen Vale, the same stars that had looked down on a 5-year-old boy pressing his palm against a stone and finding nothing. The same stars that had watched him run before sunrise when no one believed in him. The same stars that had lit the cave where he sat with a cracked black stone and decided he would not stop. Kaito leaned back and looked up at them. He had been told he was nothing. He had become the kind of nothing that the entire world had no name for, and somehow, after everything, that felt exactly right.